But Aristotle's conception of cause is significantly more complex than ours. What we tend to call a cause is really a force exerted that produces a result. So what causes the baseball to fly? The force exerted by the one up at bat. What is it that causes something? And we think in terms of a force with some causal power to produce consequences. Aristotle's not satisfied with that. What we call a force, he calls simply the efficient cause. Efficient because it has effects, it has efficacy in that sense. But it's obvious that if you want to account for the total outcome of any sort of process, whether a natural process or a process that is the result of human action, some artifact, whatever it is you're trying to account for, the kind of material that is involved, the nature of the stuff being affected, also has causal significance. So he talks of the material cause. If you were carving something out of wood, it's going to be different in consequence than if you're trying to sculpt it out of stone. The material makes a difference, as well as the work put out by the sculptor. So that's two kinds of cause, right away. But I just said that he treats the form as well as a cause, another kind of cause. He calls it the formal cause. That is to say, the essential nature of the kind of thing being produced is involved. If what we're talking about is the process whereby an acorn gradually grows into an oak tree, you see, the acorn has its form, which is the potential for the form of the oak tree. It is immanent within the acorn, this formal cause, you see. And if it weren't of the nature of an acorn, it wouldn't produce an oak tree. So you have to have a formal cause in addition. But you notice that the nature of what results is due to the potential inherent in the thing with which it began. So that there is in the nature of the formal cause something of an orientation to ends, an end orientation. He calls it a potential, a potency for something. The result is that in addition to speaking of the nature of the thing, Aristotle adds a fourth kind of causal factor, the final cause, the telos, or goal, the end in view, the purpose. And all four of these factors are involved. If, for instance, you're talking of the sculptor chiseling something out of stone, I already used that illustration to show that you have efficient cause, the chiseling work of the sculptor, and material cause, the stone rather than wood. But the formal cause, yes, the essential thing which is involved, the form of what? Whatever it is going to be. If it's a sculpture of, say, the thinker, have you seen Rodin's sculpture, the thinker? Then presumably it's going to have the form of the thinker, the essence of the thinker portrayed in presumably the posture of the person. But not only the form, but the purpose for which this is being done. Why this sculpture? To adorn the Parthenon. And that will have something to say about the proportions involved, the angle of vision required, and so forth. Now, the same is true with natural processes as with artifacts. And he always finds these four causal factors at work when he's speaking of reproduction, for instance. The material cause is the mother's body. The efficient cause is the father. The formal cause is the essential nature of the father that the child is going to bear. And so the final cause is to have offspring who are the splitting image of their old man. And that's not quite Aristotle's terminology, but it's the idea. So that you see you have four causes. Notice the chauvinistic kind of attitude of women again that came out in antiquity. You see, the woman is just the material cause. And we've come a long way, I would hope. So these four causes. Now watch for this, then, in all of his discussion. In fact, if you've been reading Book 1 of the Metaphysics, beyond those first two chapters that we commented on last time, you see that what he does in his commentary on his predecessors, which is what that Book 1 is about, is to show the way in which the early pre-Socratics thought only of material causes. You see, their question is, what is the basic stuff? Stuff. Matter. Thales said water. Anaximenes said air. Heraclitus, fire. Empedocles, earth, air, fire, and water. They're all talking about material causes. You see. Oh, efficient causes do begin to get into the act. Particularly when you get to somebody like Empedocles who talks of love and hate as moving forces, creating the cyclical outcome. And there's some hint, indeed, of formal cause, not clear, but it's anticipated in Heraclitus' logos. Anaxagoras' nous, mind. Pythagoras' numbers. And, of course, Plato. But that's where he was walking up a dead-end street the way he was doing it. And so Aristotle takes issue with Plato and with Pythagoras, whom he sees as the source for much of Plato's ideas along that line. So his discussion, you see, of the predecessors is all geared in this direction. One thing that he claims his predecessors were not clear about was the necessity of final cause. Oh, there's a hint, perhaps, in Anaxagoras. Yeah, the form, the essential nature of something for Plato seems to imply that there is something which is its natural good. That comes out especially in Plato's treatment of the human soul, you see. But they're not clear that in every process, in nature as well as in human activity, in every kind of process, there is always final cause. Aristotle sees this emphasis as his distinctive contribution to the developing metaphysical scheme thus far, introducing final causes. Now, you can see this if you will take a look at what we have in the anthology. If you look, for instance, at page 300, his commentary on his predecessors is introduced with the enumeration of these causes. Chapter 3, beginning at the bottom of the first column on 300, evidently we have to acquire knowledge of original causes, or first principles. And causes are spoken of in four senses. In one of these, we mean the substance, the essence. In another, the matter or substratum. In a third, the source of the change. In a fourth, the cause at the opposite end of this, the purpose, the good, the end for all generation and change. Now, when he says the substance, the essence, you remember, substance simply refers to the thing. The essence, what it really is. So the essence of the thing, the nature of the thing, its form, you see, that's one cause. Then the substratum, that's the stuff that's acted upon. The matter, the material cause. The source of the change, yes, the efficient cause. And then the purpose, the good, end, final cause. So he has those four. And you notice that he proceeds in the next paragraph to discuss first philosophers who thought that principles of the nature of matter were the only principles, the only causes. And so he gets there into those kinds of pre-Socratics. On page 302, in the middle of the first column, you find this statement: when one man said that reason was present throughout nature, footnote 11 points us to Anaxagoras. Remember Anaxagoras with his many, many seeds of every possible quality, ordered harmoniously by reason, nous, mind. So there's a hint there of formal cause. Then he goes on to talk of Empedocles. And on 303, chapter 5, the Pythagoreans come in for attention. And chapter 6, 305, Plato comes into focus. And notice that his discussion of Plato does not go far before at the very top of 306, he starts questioning the nature of participation. The Pythagoreans, he says, say that things exist by imitation of numbers. Plato says by participation. And what the participation or imitation could be, they left an open question. That's the big problem. How particulars participating forms? What's the connection between the two? So he goes on from there then on 306, once again to delineate the four causes. In chapter 7, he reverts again to those who speak of the first principle as of matter. In the little four-line paragraph in 307, the source of movement, be it friendship and strife, like Empedocles or what, that's efficient cause. Then the essence or form in the next paragraph. And then the telos related to that follows. So what he's after comes through clearly again and again. Now, switch forward, or yes, I think it's forward, to the physics, if you would, page 381. And you notice the same sort of thing once more. He starts chapter 8 of book 2 of his physics by saying we must now consider why nature is to be ranked among causes that are final, purposeful. Okay, there is a natural teleology, purpose, end-achieving essences in all of nature. And we must consider what is meant by necessity when we're speaking of nature. Very, very clear about that. And the section that runs from 381 to 384 is talking simply of this kind of final causation. The point is that Plato made form the cause of order and tried somehow to explain disorder and evil in terms of the resistance of nature's processes to form. You remember his saying that while the Creator, as it were, wound up the natural process, when he let it go, it started unraveling. You see. So you get these two principles, the one and then the other, that sometimes is called the dyad. Well, Aristotle isn't satisfied with that. What is it that inclines physical things towards ends that are good, orderly, beautiful? If the forms are, as Plato said, transcendent entities, which have no power that they can exert. If material things are devoid of intrinsic form, how is it that material things tend in their development toward ends that are they good, that provide order and beauty? How can we explain ordered, purposeful changes of that sort without immanent form? The innate endowment of things is what he's talking about, an inner teleology. He talks of it as a natural potency, a natural potential, which in the process is being actualized. The actualization of potential is characteristic, according to Aristotle, of all change, all processes of change, natural or artificial, as the case may be. So that in one place he says, nature never makes anything without a purpose. Nature never makes anything without a purpose. And in another place, God and nature create nothing that has not its use. its use, its purpose, its function. Okay? So he sees purpose not only in humans consciously purposing in what we do, but he sees something like purpose, though unconscious, in natural processes, processes of unconscious beings. In the general way in which various kinds of processes produce ends, we see evidence that they too are end-oriented, accordingly. Now, if there is then natural potential in everything, what an artist does is not to create, but to discover natural potentials in the physical elements of this world. The musician doesn't create music, he discovers the potential in the physics of sound. You see? The sculptor doesn't invent some design, shape. He discovers the possibilities for it in the grain of the wood or in the texture of the stone and actualizes those potentials. Art becomes a matter of discovery. There's a book on aesthetic theory edited by a former graduate professor of mine called Creation and Discovery. Creation and Discovery. Because his thesis is that art is not simply creation. That's the romanticist, 19th century romanticist glorification of human creative ability as if it were divine. You see? The artist's creativity is found in the capacity simply to conceive the possibilities inherent in the materials and to bring them to actuality. Discovery. Well, this business of nature's own potential, the inner potency, means that nothing occurs in nature random, uncaused. Now, sometimes the complexity of causes, efficient causes particularly, is such that there are, as it were, accidental, incidental causes, in addition to what would otherwise be the normal natural course of events. And when there are these extraneous accidental processes, he talks of chance. And so it's by chance that somebody has an accident on the way somewhere. It was not intended by the person. You see, by chance. A chance event is not an uncaused event. It is simply that there is a complexity of extraneous causes, causes that are extraneous to the natural process which was initiated, and which come in and produce consequences, some of which are not the good at which the process originally aimed. Well, speaking of nature in those terms, speaking of nature in these terms, in process terms, is going to mean that he thinks of nature always in process, always in change, and time is of the very essence of nature. Now, again, then, you get a bit of a contrast with Plato. Plato seems to think of time as ephemeral, something which is simply a shadow, a shifting, changing shadow of the eternal, unchanging, ever-present now. But for Aristotle, if changing processes are the very essence of things, then time is simply the way we measure processes of change. He calls time the measure of motion. And so we talk of traveling so many miles an hour. Get it? Miles or hour, or feet per second. Time. And that awareness of time as a continuum enables him to answer Zeno's paradoxes. You remember? The hare that never catches the tortoise, the chicken that never gets across the street. Yeah, because inasmuch as there is no such thing as simply motion, but always motion in relationship to time, Zeno left the time factor out. And just considered the kangaroo hops of motion, rather than how many hops per minute, second, hour. So Aristotle's view of nature then, immanent teleology. Now, what he is saying about nature becomes tremendously important. Throughout the Middle Ages, the Platonic and Aristotelian view was accepted, so that it was held that there is a natural order to everything. That all natural processes have their appointed ends, goals, and that in the course of nature, these ends and goals come to their fulfillment. Okay? Nature's own resources